So good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, firstly, to Becky, but also the Kosovo Architectural Festival team for inviting Architects for Gaza to take part in this year's programme. And thank you to everyone in the audience for sticking around. So this evening I'll be speaking on behalf of Architects for Gaza, where I'm an education co-lead and a steering group member. And I'll address the concept of repair within the context of Gaza, repair as a tool for reclaiming one's place and asserting one's right to belong. And I will do so by telling you a little bit about the work that Architects for Gaza have done over the last 2.5 years. So I'll just share my screen now, and please tell me if that's working. Let me think, maybe we can start. So,
it's working.
Okay, great, yeah. That's excellent. But first, I'll just say a couple of words about the collective itself. We are a group of architects, urban planners, scholars and practitioners, people who work in spatial practice based in Palestine, UK and many other countries around the world. I'm coming to this evening from London. And we came together in November 2023. And we gathered around architects Yael Sharif and Nasser Bolzani, whose professional and academic careers have been largely invested in working within the context of Palestine and with Palestinians. So Architects for Gaza is organised around two main clusters, rebuild and education. The rebuild cluster focuses on working with local communities and organisations by volunteering skills and knowledge for building new places where people take refuge. And the education cluster focuses on facilitating the continuation and advancement of higher education in Gaza. And in this talk this evening, I will address the projects that have been undertaken by both of these clusters. Within the context of genocide, that has further taken a form of scholasticide, herbicide and ecocide, we, Architects for Gaza, have been learning a revised definition of repair. So I will start by outlining our position in relation to the notion of repair within the fractured context of Gaza, the city and an area that have endured repeated cycle of destruction and systematic erasure. The recurrent violence enacted on this geography has been integral to the tactical denial of the Gazans' right to home, street and neighbourhood. It is a part of the broader colonial project aimed at dismantling Gaza as a physical and mental space and shredding of its social fabric. By centering the necessity to uphold this right, we address repair through the lens of Patricia Stelker's conceptualization of repair as a symptom of systemic failures rather than a part of the solution, pushing against the prevalent neoliberal narrative that posits repair as a technocratic, top-down, linear process with a fixed endpoint. Architects for Gaza argue that partial repair, so small-scale, open-ended, community-rooted process of stitching, reclaiming and reuse is in itself an anti-colonial tactic and a form of what indigenous scholar Gerald Wilsner calls survivance. In the devastating context of Gaza, repair has meant a process of bringing remnants and ruins back into life by recognizing that this requires a repairing of oneself and of institutions and cultures as much as it requires healing the city, the home and the environment. The repetitive cycles of destruction, prominent particularly since the imposition of the blockade in 2007, have reached their climax in the current genocidal campaign. This context has forced Gazans to grapple with the concept of repair in all its different facets, from material to psychological. These violent onslaughts have rendered the notion of repair a perpetual process, entrenched in everyday life, to a point of it becoming a modus vivendi. This so-called ghost of repair, as Khalid Dadeh a literary translator and academic from Gaza, has termed it, haunts Gaza and its people. It is as ephemeral as it is permanent and as intangible as it is material, and can therefore never be fully grasped or completed. The unprecedented scale and intensity of violence unleashed on Gaza since October 2023 has manifested itself in many forms of destruction. Scholasticide, a term coined by the Palestinian scholar Karman Abulsi, that implies a deliberate annihilation of an educational system and its infrastructure, has been relentlessly enacted across Gaza over the last 2.5 years in an attempt to dismantle and efface its educational system. Between October 7, 2023 and March 25, 2025, more than 57 university buildings have been completely destroyed, including Al-Azhar University and Isra University campuses, demolished in December 2023 and January 2024, respectively. In that same period, over 190 academic staff were killed, and around 87,000 students in Gaza have been directly affected by these brutal attacks. In response to these horrifying events, in December 2023, Architects for Gaza launched the Gaza Global University Call for Action as a way of mobilizing academics and practitioners in the field of architecture, urbanism, planning, and spatial practice in general, in support of the higher education institutions in Gaza and their students. We simply wanted to enable the continuation of education for Gazan students in whatever form possible, be it via virtual platforms or where feasible in physical clusters. Now, the response to the call was really formidable, gathering over 800 individuals, organizations, and institutions from almost 60 countries around the world. And they generously offered to contribute to the initiative by volunteering as tutors, mentors, and collaborators. Although most volunteers came from the field of architecture and other related disciplines, an interest in the initiative was also shown by individuals from other fields such as arts, humanities, but also sciences. And this was the first step towards weaving together a network of solidarity across different geographies as an effort to constellate diverse sets of skills, knowledges, and experiences that could contribute to even larger networks of repair mobilized in the aid of Gaza and its people. In April 2024, Architects for Gaza, Gaza's Global University, was invited by Al-Najah National University in Nablus to join an initiative launched by UNIMED in collaboration with several universities in the West Bank. The aim of this ambitious action was to provide Gazan students with an opportunity to continue their education via universities in the West Bank by virtually attending programs that were specifically designed for them. So the pivotal aspect of this project was the decision that these tailor-made programs and courses would have to be recognized by students' home institutions in Gaza, and that their degrees would therefore be awarded by the same institutions. And the initiative itself was considered temporary until the home universities were able to resume teaching. And it was really, all of this was to make sure that the universities in Gaza were not undermined, but just supported by this endeavor. And the network established through the initial Gaza Global University call was then mobilized, and we were able to provide a number of volunteers. They were scattered across 3 different continents, and they joined the initiative online and worked with Gazan students over the course of the following 9 months. The incredible commitment, courage, and determination shown by the students themselves, who often had to traverse kilometers on foot and risk their lives to reach a point where they would be able to join the class online, had been nothing short of absolutely inspirational and impressive. But it's really necessary to constantly remind ourselves that these and other outstanding acts of resilience come as a response to unbearable conditions that the people of Gaza have been subjected to. And they are a form of survivance, which connotes a fusion of resistance and survival. Now, in the given context, as Yara Sharif and Rima Hamami remind us, survival is in fact a crucial form of resistance and as such needs to be stripped of its negative connotations. Survival can be understood as a resolve to pursue daily activities, tend to the land, commit to the ways of living which challenge the oppression that shapes everyday life. And that requires stamina, steadfastness and fortitude. It is also a way of asserting one's belonging to the community, to the land, and to the wider world. Now, as the engagement with UNIMED and Al-Najaf University started to wind down towards the end of 2024, and Gaza University started to rise again and resume their duties despite the destruction, Gaza Global University joined forces with the Office of Displaced Designers and Global Free Unit to deliver a 2-week workshop titled Rebuilding Home, Street and Neighborhood, which took place in Cairo, Egypt in February 2025. The aim of this event was to bring together displaced architecture students from Gaza based in Cairo with academics, practitioners and scholars from Palestine, Egypt, UK and other countries to start discussing, envisaging and articulating what repair in the context of Gaza could look like. And just to say a couple of words about the work you see here, Cartographies of Self and Space was an exercise where students and practitioners explored memory and imagination through site writing, mapping and speculation. And in What is Home, participants traced their homes and mapped their routes through Gaza, illustrating shared memories as their paths intersected. By foregrounding the voices and visions of Gazans themselves, the workshop aimed to reaffirm our stance that the people of Gaza have the right to home and the right to the city, and they have the right to belong. Amid the bombing and displacement, a quiet but powerful network of community-rooted repair is already underway in Gaza. The Gazans return to abandoned homes a day, a week, or months later to assemble its fragments into a semblance of home. These acts may first seem practical, designed for survival in an emergency situation, but they are also acts of surveillance. We are reminded that not only have indigenous peoples survived the genocidal visions of settler colonialism, but they have also continued to enliven their cultures in critical and generative ways. In Gaza, this can be seen in everyday acts of so-called partial repair, a term used by Farid Al-Fiqh, a leading academic visionary working on emergency repair in Gaza. While many buildings in Gaza have been completely destroyed, there are also many that are only partly damaged, and these have been the focus of Al-Fiqh and his team's work. They create small clearings amid the rubble and ruin by stitching together existing homes with the presence and knowledge of local residents, a practice that provides some respite amid the continual displacement and destruction. Other examples of partial repair in Gaza include efforts to empower neighborhoods through creating their own decentralized community clusters. These networks also demonstrate an understanding of repair that transcends physical reconstruction through the strengthening of collective networks that build a sustainable resilience and unity through community-driven practices. The aim of this community-rooted repair is to instill hope, resilience and solidarity in a situation where 76% of Gaza's city's 21 neighborhoods face a perilous situation. Working remotely, Architects for Gaza started contributing to these efforts. In November 2024, through the development of an atlas of materials, which explored waste, rubble, and other readily available materials in Gaza as both building resource and narrative device to reimagine the process of construction. This work was carried out in conversation with local architects, engineers, and community members in Gaza, and formed the basis for our approach to repair, reclamation, and stitching as tactics of architectural and spatial design rooted in local practices. The installation that you see on the screen, titled Gaza Off the Grid Experimental Lab, was curated by Yara Sharif and Nasser Bozari with Francois Girardin and Paolo Cascone, and alongside a group of Architects for Gaza volunteers, and it was exhibited as a part of the London Festival of Architecture 2024, and it really unpacked atlas of materials, trying to compile and assemble a matrix of possibilities to cultivate small change. The one-to-one segments were designed and built as examples of building techniques that use locally available materials in conditions of scarcity, and the prototypes were constructed by architecture students from the University of Westminster, where the exhibition was on show in June 2024. So this experimental lab, which is also known as the clinic, was envisaged in collaboration with the Mobile International Surgical Teams, also known as MIST. It's a medical non-governmental organization which has been operating in Gaza since 2010. So the idea was born in response to the healthcare infrastructure in Gaza being virtually decimated since October 2023, with over 70% of all healthcare facilities destroyed. With a focus on providing primary care, the idea was that these temporary structures could be staffed with MIST's own general practitioner and doctors that could operate in addition to whatever is left of the kind of healthcare facilities on the ground. This so-called roaming or mobile clinic was conceived to be demountable. The main structure is a timber framework that has been bolted together so it can be easily dismantled and moved wherever it is most needed. The electricity is to be provided by solar panels, which also serve as louvers, and the wind capture and wet clay panels provide ventilation and evaporative cooling, which is meant to replace air conditioning. Other solutions feature corrugated metal roofs, polycarbonate windows that let in light but block out heat, and structural support made of RIBA, sandbags, and rubble-filled gabion baskets. Domestic objects like folding bed, fabric blinds, and privacy screens were also used as a way of providing the patients with a sense of privacy, safety, to say as much as one can feel safe in that context. There can also be a blueprint of how these different elements can be used in a more kind of domestic, private settings. But before I move on to the next project, I would just like to linger a little bit longer on the issue of the treatment of rubble. The practice of reusing rubble for rebuilding has been commonplace in Gaza for years, largely due to the ban on importing cement and other types of construction materials since the imposition of the blockade in 2007. As such, rubble already, so to speak, articulates overlaying temporalities, embodying both past and present relationships with home, belonging, and domesticity. So in our approach to the treatment of rubble, we have learned from the Polish-Canadian scholar Jerzy Janowski, who scrutinizes a European tradition kind of rooted in the picturesque, where the ruin becomes a tool for understanding what he describes as the, and I quote, the uncomfortable relationship between culture and nature. According to thinkers such as Georg Zimmer, the results of man-made violence unleashed upon the built and lived environment sit outside of such relationships, thus rendering the notion of ruin into rubble, and according to him, that is, once something is a rubble, it is nothing but a material without cultural significance, which is meant to be cleared off. Now, Janowski contests this division, and within the context of post-World War II rebuilding of Warsaw, he attributes a memorial character to the rubble, specifically due to the fact that it contained human remains. Well, this conceptual schism in the traditional kind of Western European articulation of ruin versus rubble is for us in a way lost in Gaza. And as the cultural and intimate significance of rubble, which not only embodies the remnants of one's home or place of attachment, but also often contains a detritus of the remains of the loved ones, is by no means inferior to its practical value and potential as a building material. Now, while the ruin should not be aestheticized or fetishized, it is important, and it is important to enable a continuum of inhabitation while acting against the profanation of rubble and the reduction of it to nothing but a raw material. Key to this is the adaptation of ruined rubble as a permeable skin, which can serve as a tool to mark and reclaim the footprints of the lost homes, land plots, and neighborhoods. It is a way to sustain the urban fabric and traces as they once were, reaffirming ownership and preserving the lived experiences and sense of place that define Gazan communities. Now, in November 2024, we were approached by local partners in Gaza to address two specific sites in Gaza City. These projects are currently being further developed by local partners and architects on the ground, so I can't really go into much detail about them, but I'll just briefly explain our approach while working on these two sites. The sites are Al-Sheikh Radwan Reservoir, also known as the Lagoon, and the other one is Al-Yarmouk Cultural and Sports Centre. Now, we consciously focused on phased interventions based on immediate needs as well as kind of longer-term aspirations. And rather than being engaged in some sort of grand visions that cannot be easily adapted to changing circumstances, our approach considered strategically significant public sites at sort of varying scale that can be incrementally implemented and constructed. The proposals are an outcome of a collective effort by two teams. Both teams were made up of AFG members and volunteers on the one hand, but also architects from the heart of Gaza and also overseen by our local partners. The work has involved mapping important sites, buildings, both existing and demolished, plant species and locally available materials. And this process has been crucial to identifying and honouring the social, cultural and historic values embedded in each site. Each site was approached differently, obviously reflecting the site's scale and the nature of the brief. And in both cases, the proposals are to be further developed by local architects. And this is really important. As Architects for Gaza, we see ourselves as facilitators, not someone to kind of impose solutions from top down. We kind of give quite open-ended, proposed sort of ideas that can be, taken or left. And finally, just a couple of words about another project in 2025. Our founders, Yahya Sharif and Nasser Bolzari, along with their colleague Murray Fraser, with whom they run another organisation titled Palestine Regeneration Team, were invited to be a part of the British Pavilion at the Architecture Biennale in Venice, with their installation titled Objects of Repair. Geology of Britannic Repair, which is the title of the last year's British Pavilion, explored how architecture is implicated in ongoing empires of geology, defined by forms of extraction that are complicit in inequality, injustice, and environmental degradation, while also recognizing that architecture equally offers opportunities for repair, reparation, and renewal. The installation, inspired by the Architects for Gaza's Atlas of Materials project, explored alternative methods of construction in conditions of scarcity, using clay and crushed concrete as tools to create a cooling skin and outer skin. It also featured, as we can see in this image, the everyday tools of repair to demonstrate the possibilities of construction with available materials. And I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you all very much. Hope that was within the time.